शुक्लाम्बरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये। गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। वञ्जनानन्दनं वीरं जानकी शोकनाशनं कपीशमक्षहन्तारं वन्दे लङ्काभयङ्करम्। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकी नन्दनाय च नन्दगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। Namaskaram. Welcome to the 40th session of Narayaneeyam for Dasekam 27 by Bhattadri. We saw in the last session how Bhagavan waited until King Indradyumna, who by curse was born as Gajendra, let go his overconfidence so that Gajendra could save himself from the clutches of the croc Hoo and ultimately surrendered to the Lord Supreme, even though after a 1,000-year struggle. That episode brings out an interesting interpretation of giving up of the falsehood, including false assurances to oneself and false pride and false confidence. In any manner you can interpret it, but otherwise often deemed as ego. This brings to forefront the two stages of samadhi, samprajñātaha and asamprajñātaha. These are the two words you may have occasionally or rarely listened to. In the first stage of samadhi, samprajñāta or cognitive absorption, the devotee has only Bhagavan in mind but is conscious of his or her meditating on the ultimate supreme. In the higher stage, because of the dropping of asmita or ego, even that consciousness is lost, resulting in total union with Parabrahman. Symbolically, this necessary transition is brought out by saying Bhagavan is waiting for the devotee to give up everything and surrender unto him. You may remember the oft-repeated slokam from Bhagavad Gita, Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. That is what Gajendra did finally. And Bhagavan rushed to his rescue instantly. Because in the second line of the same slokam, Bhagavan says, Aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami ma suchaha. So the full slokam, as you have heard, Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. Aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami ma suchaha. You may have gone to numerous temples, particularly the temples where Lord Srinivasa, Lord Kesava, Lord Krishna, wherever you go in Vaishnava temples, the signature there, either on the Moolavar or the Sanctum Sanctorum, would contain this slokam. Sarvadharman paridhyacya mamekam sharanam vraja. In other words, Bhagavan says, drop everything, including your confidence that you can save yourself. But once you do that, I am there to save you from everything. Everything including your ego or false assurances to one's own self. Today we will be seeing the first of the three Dashakams, Dashakam number 27, that Bhattadri offers to narrate the churning of the Milky Ocean and the incidents that resulted from such an action. This particular Dashakam can be highlighted as Amruta Manthana. In fact, all three Dashakams, 27, 28 and 29, relate to Amruta Manthanam, but different parts of what happens when the Amruta Manthanam takes place. Srimad Bhagavatam highlights these incidents front and forth in Canto 8, chapters 5 to 13. Anyone who is interested in a detailed reference may go back to that. Kurmavatara is the highlight for today. The demigods or devas in pursuit of Amrutam or ambrosia, believed to help regain their lost splendor and prosperity resulting from that curse of Durvasa. Durvasaga suravanitapta dinyamalyo Durvasaha suravanitapta dinyamalyam Shukraya swayam upadaya tatra bhuyaha Nagendra pratimudite chashapa chakra Kakshanti paditara dhemata amsajanayam Nagendra pratim udite chachapa chakra Kakshanti paditara devata amsajanam Durvasaha Suravanita Apta Divyamalyam Shukraya Swayam Upadaya Tatra Bhuyaha Nagendra Pritam Udite Shashapa Chakram Kakshantihi Tvat Itara Devata Amsajanam. Long ago, when sage Durvasa was journeying in heaven, a celestial nymph gave him a divine garland. She told him that the garland would bestow on any wearer of that garland exalted respect and regard in all the three worlds. That means the earth, heaven, and the intermediate region. The sage decided that he should give the garland to the most deserving person. Just then he saw Indra coming, riding on his elephant, Airavata. Immediately Durvasa presented the garland to Indra, as he thought Indra would be the fitting or the most deserving one to wear it. But Indra, already the lord of the three worlds, was so puffed up with prosperity and pride, thought that he had nothing to gain by wearing such an ordinary-looking garland. He disdainfully threw it on the head of his elephant. Bees in large numbers were attracted by the fragrance of the garland, and then they swarmed around the elephant. Unable to bear this disturbance from the bees, the furious elephant pulled the garland with its trunk, threw it on the ground, and with anger trampled on it. On seeing this, the sage was highly infuriated. Remember, it is Durvasa. And he cursed Indra and all his followers in heaven who were touting around Indra. You and all your people in heaven will be divested of all your splendor and suffer. Why was Durvasa, a great sage, so lacking in forbearance? We hear often Durvasa said like that, Durvasa did a shapam to somebody, and because of Durvasa someone was suffering, etc. Indicating that this was natural to Durvasa, Bhattadri says, O Lord, people born as your aspect will have a superior quality of self-control because of your sattvic nature. But those who have come from others who are full of rajas and tamas cannot have such qualities. Therefore, how can we expect patience or forbearance in Durvasa, who emerged from the sweat of Lord Rudra? This is what Bhattadri raises the question. This interpretation of Bhattadri should not be mistaken as parochial or diminishing the greatness of Supreme Lord Shiva, who is nothing but another aspect of Brahman, by Brahman's choice. Durvasa was indeed a son of Atri and a younger brother of Bhagavan Dattatreya. The answer to the question raised by Bhattadri is given by Durvasa himself as stated in Vishnu Puranam. Durvasas refers to one of the three sons of Atri and Anasuya, and Anasuya incidentally is one of the 24 daughters of Daksha and Prasuti. Durvasas meant poorly clothed, naked. So the name came from his appearance. And this is the definition given in Mahabharata. The background story of Durvasa's curse is not given in Srimad Bhagavatam. It just refers to Durvasa's curse as the reason for the Deva's loss of splendor for eons. In Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said, Yada Durvasaha Shapena Sendra Lokastrayo Nrupa Nishrikascha Abhavam Satra Neshuri Jadeha Kriyaha. At that time, O Parikshit, the demigods had been cursed by Durvasa Muni. The three worlds were poverty stricken. Therefore, ritualistic ceremonies could not be performed. The effects of these were profoundly serious. Though Valmiki Ramayanam and Mahabharatam describe the churning of the Milky Ocean, they do not seem to mention the story of Durvasa's curse alongside or as a cause for that to happen. Thus, it is Bhattadri who narrates as from Vishnu Puranam in first chapter, 9th subchapter, 16th sloka, tells about the curse. Durvasa says to Indra, as you have thrown the garland given by me to the ground, may all the three worlds of yours be divested of their splendor. When an attempt was made by Indra to appease the Muni and surrender unto Durvasa, Durvasa calmed down a bit but said, I am neither a kind-hearted person, nor is there any place for forbearance in my heart. Once I have given the curse, it has to happen. Do not consider me as you do of all other sages who relent and just give you a vimochana. Know me as Durvasa. Naham kripalu hrudayo nachamam bhajate kshama. Anyete munayaha shukra durvasasam evahimam. You have become so proud as to insult me because of the loud adorations of kind-hearted sages like Vasishtha and others, who does not in the three worlds get frightened seeing my countenance with crooked brows and matted hair. What do you think will happen by repeating this mockery of conciliation? Naham kshamishye bahuna kimuktena shatakratau vidambanam imam bhuyaha karoshya anunayatmikam. I'm not going to pardon you. Whatever you say, whatever you beg, the curse was given, you have to go through the curse and the result that comes out of it. This is again Vishnu Puranam in Book 1, Chapter 9, Slokas 20 to 24 describe Indra's surrender and Durvasa's responses, etc. Shapena pradita jareta nirjarendre Shapena pradita jareta nirjarendre Deveshvapi asurajiteshu nishprabeshu Sarvadhyaha kamalajamedya sarvadevaya nirvana prabhavasamu bhavangamapu Sarvadhyaha kamalajamedya sarvadeva nirvana prabhavasamu bhavantamapu Shapena pradita jareta nirjarendre deveshvapi asurajiteshu nishprabeshu sharvadhyaha kamalajamedya sarvadeva nirvana prabhavasamam bhavantam apuhu. By sage Durvasa's curse, Indra and the other devas were afflicted with old age and the resulting signs of wrinkles and grey hair, which were not common before the curse. They lost all their prowess. Especially even aging started putting the pain on them. Taking advantage of the situation, the Asuras defeated the Devas and drove them away from heaven. Thus, deprived of their kingdom and all other riches, including the superfine qualities that were blessed to them as Devas, They all ran to Lord Shiva, then to Brahma, but all of them decided, together with Lord Shiva and Brahma, to take refuge unto you, O Guruvairappa, because you are the source of salvation. That is what Bhattadri says. The authors addressing the Lord as Nirvana Prabhava is source of salvation here. Indicates that the Devas would get their grievances completely redressed if they approach the Lord Supreme, who is the embodiment of bliss and beatitude, and hence capable of destroying all sorrows of people. Brahmati Sutamahimachirau Tadanim Pradushan Varagapuraha Parena Damna Brahmati Sutamahimachirau Tadanim Pradushan Varagapuraha Parena Damna He Deva Ditijagunairvidaya Sandhim Piyusham Parimatatyeti Paryashatum Piyusham Parimatatyeti Paryashatum He Deva Ditijagunairvidaya Sandhim Piyusham Parimatatyeti Paryashatum Brahmadehi Stuta Mahima Chiram Tadanim Pradushan Varadapuraha Parena Dhamna He Deva Ditija Kulaihi Vidaya Sandhim Piyusham Parimatat Eta Paryasastvam. Lord Shiva, Brahma, and all other Devas praised you for long with hymns extolling your greatness as in the Vedas. Bhagavane, you are ever ready to grant desired boons to your devotees and hence manifested before them with the effulgence of innumerable suns rising together, and entreated them all and kindly said, O Devas, make peace with Asuras for the present, at least let it be a tactical move, and take steps to churn out ambrosia from the milky ocean, which is the panacea for all your afflictions. Take Mandara mountain for churning rod and the serpent king Vasuki for the rope of churning the milky ocean. In other words, Bhagavan tells Devas, bury your pride because you have nothing left. You don't have the strength. You needed cooperation and help from the powerful Asuras now. Go to them in all humility and somehow convince them so that they all agree to be with you for churning out ambrosia out of the milky ocean. So this is a tact which Bhagavan explains to Devas. 1,000 or more years before this concise summary which Bhattadri has said in Shloka number 2, 1,000 or more years before this concise summary as narrated by Bhattadri in Shloka 3, Ilango Adigal did it in one line in Shilapatikaram. That was the earliest Tamil epic by Ilango Adigal, a prince from Chera dynasty who took to asceticism as a Jain monk, and he is reportedly, historically dated 2nd century of Common Era. The author brings about the Amruta Manthana in his section titled Aichiyar Kuravai, a song popularized by Bharat Ratna Srimati Amma Subbalakshmi. Vadavarayai Mattaki Vasukiyai Nanaki Kadal Vannan Pandurunal Kadal Vairu Kalakinaye Kalakiya Kai Ashodayar Kadai Kayitral Katunkai Marak Kamala Undiyai Mayamu Marukkaite. If someone can compact a major epic incident in just one line of poetry, that can only be Ilango Adigal through his epic, especially about Amruta Manthanam. If anybody has put it in just a matter of 2 lines, it is Ilango Adigal. The northern mountain Mandara was made into the churning rod, and the giant serpent Vasuki became the churning rope, and the legendary gigantic milky ocean became the pot of cream or buttermilk. And the churning was done at the instance of the one with the body resembling the dark hue of Samudra, while of course He himself got caught at the hands of Yashoda, who tied him with a beaten short rope used for churning buttermilk. Look at this small little fellow, resembling the dark hue of Samudra, with the navel resembling a beautiful lotus, and look at his trick of behaving as though he is such a powerless boy bound by the cowherdess Yashoda. Malarkamala undiyai mayamo marutkaite. The way Krishna behaves in front of Yashoda as if he was afraid of Yashoda has been described by 1,000 poets and all the Azwars in one form or the other as to his Maya. Santanam kritavati danavaihi surauge mantanam nayati madena mandaradriyo brattesmyu badaram imodvagan kagendre sadyatvam vinihitavan payapayodo. Sandanam kritavati danavaihi suroge mantanam nayati madena mandaradrim brashtesmin bhadaram ivodvahan kagendre sadyastvam vinihitavan payapayodo. The Devas, as advised by Brahma, who was so counseled by Mahavishnu, approached the Asuras and cleverly made peace with them. The suspicious Asuras also agreed to join hands with the Devas in churning the Milky Ocean, since they knew that the result could be very beneficial to them. Otherwise, why should they really shake hands with Devas? They knew that Devas were tricking them, but Asuras also had something in their mind. In their coming together, the warring cousins found a new strength, and it made them feel proud that they not only cut a piece of card, but they are going to get something out of it, which Asuras were confident they could somehow lift it off. They even thought that they between themselves could churn the ocean without anyone's help. Of course, this kind of thinking is always there when two parties or two sections of people or two huge countries, powerful nations, when they fight, they suddenly wave a white flag and do a diplomacy there because the final result, one thinks, will be a buffer over the other person. Because they think that in the final analysis, the result will be beneficial to each and every one of the groups, or one of the groups, or one of the countries. This is why diplomacy works often instead of huge wars and baseless violence. Puffed up with this new pride or arrogance, they raised the Mandara mountain and started carrying it towards the Samudram. Often a question has been raised to me, why Mandara? Is it because Mandara and Meru mountains are one and the same? Why a Mandara reference is here, not the Meru reference? No. Meru mountain is more mythological and reported to be the cosmic axis, whereas in the Puranic lore and in particular Mahabharatam refer to Mandara as the one used for Samudra Manthana. Coming back to our story, halfway through, the newly joined cousins became so exhausted that they could not proceed any further when Mandara mountain fell down from their aching hands, because they were supposed to carry the mountain right to the middle of Milky Ocean for putting it as a churning rod. But despite all their prowess and power, they could not continue the journey of taking it on to the Milky Ocean. So it finally fell down from their hands. Many Devas and Asuras in the process, in millions, got crushed under the mountain when it slipped and fell. Thus ended all their arrogance in their newfound strength, and they became exhausted, frustrated, even to the point pessimistic about the whole effort. At that time, Bhagavan, who is the protector of the afflicted, manifested before them, sitting on the shoulders of Garuda. By his auspicious and blissful glance, Bhagavan revived the dead Asuras and Devas and brought all of them alive and said, "Now you go ahead. I'll give you the power to see that you complete your journey." Then sportively, Bhagavan lifted the mountain by one hand as though it was a tiny berry, kept it on Garuda, speedily flew, and placed it in the middle of the Milky Ocean. Remember, millions of Devas and Asuras had to drop it down and get killed in the process. However, Bhagavan simply comforts them, brings all of them back to life, but lifts the mountain in one hand playfully and then speedily proceeds to the middle of the ocean and drops Manthana there. आदाय धृतमदवासुकिं वरत्रं पातोदौ विनिहित सर्वबीजजाले प्रारब्धे मतनविदौ सुरासुरैतैः व्याजाद्वं भुजगमुखे अकरोत्सुरारीम् 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 आदाय धृतमत वासुकीं वरत्रां पातोधौ विनिहित सर्वबीजजाले प्रारब्धे मतनविदौ सुरासुरैः तैः व्याजात्वं भुजगमुखे अकरोत्सुरारीम्. Summoning the serpent king, the leader of Nagas, King Vasuki, for using him as a rope for churning, the combined army of Devas and Asuras wound him around Mandara mountain, which eventually became the churning rod, thanks to Bhagavan placing it in the middle of the ocean. All kinds of medicinal herbs were put in the ocean to accentuate and purify the entire process of churning, and for an extraordinary result which had never been attempted before. The Devas and the Asuras got ready for the churning. At that time, with the sole intention of protecting his devotees, Devas, Bhagavan used a stratagem. He stood by the head of Vasuki and held the king of Naga by the head, ready to churn, and said, "All Devas, come behind me and stand on this side." The Asuras did not like this action of Bhagavan and also the Devas in the least. They said, "You shall not go to the head side." But the Devas also protested, saying, "We are not going to take the tail side as Asuras want, because the tail end of the serpent is inauspicious and unclean. We who are enriched by the study of Vedas and all other scriptures and who are renowned for our birth and deeds and by our birth and deeds will not hold the tail ever." Hearing this, the Asuras said, "Who do you think you are? We are equally conscious of our noble birth who our parentage has been. We are not willing to hold a thing which you all consider unfit for yourselves to hold." You may remember, slightly digressing here, when the current administration sent a bunch of people whom they arrested here under one charge or the other, put them in a plane, sent them to an African nation, very little known in the news, or even the name is unknown to many people. That small African nation headed by a king was ready to accept these and put these US prisoners in their prison. But the small country, hardly 1 million people living in that country, protested to the king, and they took to the streets saying, "If US consider these people not to be held in their prison, why are they considering our country as a dump yard, and why should we accept those if they are really criminals?" So such a thing happens even today. Anyway, coming back to our topic here, in protest, Asuras went aside and said, "We are not doing it," and they stood quietly away from the churning. Then Bhagavan said, "If both parties are adamant like this and you will not come together, we have done so much effort so far to even have the Mandara place there and the snake is ready. You got everything ready and going. How can we proceed with the task? If the Asuras persist and Devas also do, we will not move from the place, then there is no solution here." Then when they were listening to him, with a mischievous smile, Bhagavan pushed and led the Devas and said, "Okay, now I am telling you, go to the tail side because we need Karya Sadhakam." And thereby moved them, convinced them over to the tail end of Vasuki. Apparently pleased with this new arrangement, where Asuras felt that they actually won their argument and got what they wanted, and saw gleefully the apparent surrender of Devas, Asuras moved to hold the head of Vasuki and start the churning. They all then began the churning. Holding Vasuki's head initially was a clever stratagem played by Bhagavan and the Asuras in order to ensure that they protest, demand, and finally hold the head of the poisonous behemoth at the time of churning, because Bhagavan was fully aware of what is going to happen. He was also aware that Vasuki would be subjected to extreme stress during the great process of churning, and that he is definitely going to vomit poison, and that hot poisonous fumes are going to emit from the 1,000 mouths of Vasuki, and God knows what's going to happen, only he knew. If the Devas, his devotees, were stationed near the head of that huge snake, they would all be severely burnt by the inexplicable heat of the poisonous fumes. This was his ploy, to have caused all the initial ruckus for head and tail, created his mischief, and got the job done according to how he had already previously planned. Though the Asuras, for that special purpose and time, behaved like friends again with the Devas, it was a well-known secret that this was only a temporary need-based alliance, that they were eternal natural enemies of the Devas and vehemently averse to Bhagavan and his devotees. This episode also clearly shows the concern of Bhagavan towards his devotees who depend on him always, especially when they are in real distress. Shubdadrau Shobita Jalodare Tadanim Dugdabdau Gurutara Bharato Nimagne Deveshu Vyatitatameshu Tatpriyaishi Pranaishi Kamatatanu Kadora Brittam Pranaishi Kamatatanu Kadora Brittam Shubdadrau Shubita Jalodare Tadanim Dugdhabdau Gurutara Bharato Nimagne Deveshu Vyatitameshu Tatpriyaishi Pranaishihi Kamatatanam Katora Prishtam. When the Devas and the Asuras started churning the Milky Ocean, the churning rod, Mandara mountain, owing to its huge weight and lack of support at its bottom while in waters, began to sink into the depths of the ocean. The Devas and Asuras were heartbroken as their efforts were frustrated by a much more powerful destiny beyond all of their control and efforts and conciliation. At that time, Bhagavan, desirous of fulfilling the wishes of Devas, you assumed the form of a wonderful and inexplicably gigantic tortoise with a hard back in order to raise the mountain and support it from the bottom during the churning process. Basically, nobody had to do anything. Bhagavan took the avatara, went underneath the mountain Mandara, lifted it up. Thus the Devas were blessed by you once again. Is it not your oft-repeated style to take unimaginable forms appropriate to the occasions to protect your devotees? This was another exclamation by Bhattadri. Vajratistiradara karparena Vishnu Vistarat Hari-Katha lakshayojanena Ambodege Kugharagatena Varshnatam Nirmagnau Chididharanatam Punnineta Nirmagnau Chididharanatam Punnineta Nirmagnau Chididharanatam Punnineta Vajratis Tiratara Karparena Vishnu Vistarat Hari-Katha Lakshayojanena Ambodhe Kuhargatena Bhashmanatvam Nirmagnam Shitidharanatam Munnineta. O Vishnu, you lifted up the king of mountains which had sunk into the ocean and supported it on your back, assuming the form of a gigantic tortoise with a hard back wider than a Laksha Yojanas, 100,000 Yojanas. One Yojana refers to 5 miles according to Brihat Samhita, chapter 2, written by Varahamihira in the 6th century Common Era. The back of the tortoise was harder than diamond, even that of Vajrayudha. As you are aware, Vajrayudha was said to have been made out of the bones of sage Dadichi, which we saw in an earlier session. But the back of the tortoise here was harder than diamond, even that of Vajrayudha. Since you are all pervading, you are always present inside the ocean, and you had no difficulty in assuming the form of the tortoise and to lift the mountain nonchalantly. The author's address of the Lord as Vishnu clearly brings out the incarnation and the effortless action of Bhagavan. As the mountain came to the surface, the Devas and Asuras resumed the churning again. Unmagne jatiti धराधरेन्द्रे निर्मेतुः दृढमिह सम्मदेन सर्वे आविच्य द्विदयगणेऽपि सर्पराजे वैवश्यं परिसमयन् अविवृदत्तागरन् वैवश्यं परिसमयन् अविवृदत्ताम् उन्मग्ने जटिति तदा धराधरेन्द्रे निर्मेतुः दृढमिह सम्मदेन सर्वे आविश्य द्वितय गणेऽपि सर्पराजे वैवश्यं परिसमयन् अविवृदः तान्. Seeing that the mountain was quickly lifted by you, the dejected Devas and Asuras felt exhilarated and began churning the ocean with fresh vigor and enthusiasm in concert, which was not so common. Soon, they and the Serpent King got exhausted again. At that time, Bhagavane, you entered the demons in your demonic aspect, adding to their rajasic nature. And you also entered in Devas in your divine aspect, which is the sattvic nature. And Vasuki in the form of suspended consciousness, so as to deaden him to the pain he would feel as a result of his being pulled and rubbed against the rugged surface of the mountain. What does this mean in description of what we saw from Bhagavatam and Narayaneeyam and all that? So he decided, let me enter the Asuras in Rajasic form. Let me enter into every one of the Devas in divine form or sattvic nature. And finally, to make Vasuki in suspended consciousness so that his pain is completely relieved. O Guruvayurappa, you destroyed their weariness and stimulated their strength and energy to churn the ocean. Ubdama Brahmana Javavunnamagirindra Nyattaika Stititara Hatta Pankajam Twayam Uddama Brahmana Javavunnamagirindra Nyattaika Tiratara Hatta Pankajam Twam अभ्रान्ते विधिगिरिशादय प्रमोदाते उद्भ्रान्तानुनुः उपात्त पुष्पवर्षाः उद्भ्रान्ता नुनुः उपात्त पुष्पवर्षाः. Uddama Brahmanajava Unnamad Girindraha Nestaika Stiratarahasta Pankajam Twam Abhrante Vidhi Girishadeha Pramodad Udbranta Nunuhu Upatta Pushpavarshaha. Having regained their strength and energy by your immense grace, O Bhagavane, they churned the ocean with vigor and enthusiasm. At that time, there arose yet another great impediment. As the mountain whirled about so powerfully, it began to spring frequently. This prevented proper churning of the ocean. Oh Bhagavane, then you came to the rescue again by assuming a huge divine form endowed with 1,000 arms. You kept the mountain pressed down with one hand so that mountain was held steady in its position. Seeing this magnificent form of yours, Bhagavan Shiva, Brahma and all others were excited, thrilled with wonder and joy, and then they praised you with divine hymns from their positions in their heavens in the region of the clouds, to the accompaniment of a profuse shower of flowers. Here the use of the expression Abhrante Stitaha is noteworthy, referring to the positions or abodes of these gods in the region of the clouds, implying that just as the clouds pour out torrents of rain, these gods too showered heaps of flowers as continuous downpour. दैत्योगे भुजगमुखानिलेन तप्ते दैत्योगे भुजगमुखानिलेन तप्ते तेनैव त्रिदशकुलेऽपि किञ्चिदार्ते कारुण्यात् तव किल देववारिवाहः प्रावर्षन् अमरगणान् न दैत्यसङ्गान् कारुण्यात् तव किल देववारिवाहः प्रावर्षन् अमरगणान् न दैत्यसङ्गान् अमरगणान् न दैत्यसङ्गान् दैत्योगे भुजगमुखानिलेन तप्ते तेनैव त्रिदशकुलेऽपि किञ्चित् आर्ते कारुण्यात् तव किल देव वारिवाहाः प्रावर्षन्नमरगणान् न दैत्यसङ्घान्. With you maintaining the mountain steady by keeping it pressed down from the top and supporting it from below on your hard back as Kurma, and rejuvenating the Devas, the Asuras and Vasuki by entering into them, the conditions for churning became really ideal. The Devas and the Asuras churned the ocean so vigorously as to cause a great stir in the ocean itself. Due to the violent churning, Vasuki began to breathe out furious, poisonous fumes through his 1,000 mouths. The Asuras were tricked by the Lord to hold the head end of the serpent, were tormented by the heat of the fumes. Devas also were troubled by the fumes because they were growing in all directions, but to a much lesser extent as they were at the tail end of the serpent. You, Bhagavane, caused heavy showers on the Devas' side. Thus you relieved your devotees from the fumes, but not on the Asuras. If in the process some of the Asuras have to disappear, so be it. Cool breeze, moistened by the waves of the ocean, slowly blew over the Devas for their further relief. This unusual taking of sides by the most balanced and neutral person, namely the Parabrahman, in the form of Lord Vishnu, may cause confusion in the minds of many devotees. As to the status mentioned in the fourth slokam, when God revived all dead ones earlier, crushed by Mandara mountain, not only the Devas but also the Asuras, whereas here Lord Vishnu caused cool breeze on the side of the Devas and let the Asuras be taunted by heat and exhaustion. How can this be explained? Is God partial to people because of their actions and behavior and their qualities? The answers are fairly simple. Vishnu revived everyone that died at first so that all of them can focus on the task and complete it, because which is essential. Bhagavan was not merciful to the Asuras because of their puffed up pride and the violence and all the callousness they have shown towards the creation, their subjects and everyone else, and their total or abject disregard for righteous living and adherent to divine laws. Therefore, you did not make the clouds rain on their side. What does this teach us? Fast forward from that particular yuga right on to today in Kali Yuga. Bhagavan does take sides with righteous people who do righteous things and believe in him totally, and definitely for those who are hedonistic, Bhagavan is his own way of tackling them. He takes all of them finally to his final abode in one form or the other, to one loka or the other, all right. But the process is much simpler for devotees who have divine faith, and certainly not so for heathens who do not believe in God or in good deed or action. That we are going to see, we are seeing somewhat to a limited extent, but we will see in the near future to a larger extent. In the next sloka is described the situation when the churning of the ocean did not generate nectar even after churning for a very long time. Udbramyan bahutimi nakra chakravale Udbramyan bahutimi nakra chakravale Tatrabdo chiramadide abhinirvikare Ekatmo karayuga kritta sarparajaha Saurajan pavanapuresha pagirogayat Pavanapuresha pagirogayat Pavanapuresha samrajan pagirogayat. Udbramyat bahutimi nakra chakravale tatrabdau chiramatite api nirvikare ekastvam karayuga krishna sarparajaha samrajan pavanapuresha pahirogat. Long time did the union of Devas and Asuras continue the churning of the ocean, but with no results beyond ejection of many aquatic creatures like crocodiles, whales and the like to the surface of the ocean from its depths. There was no change in the natural state of the ocean. Seeing neither nectar nor other precious things emerging from the ocean, both Devas and Asuras became tired and lost interest and even frustrated. Then Bhagavan, he who bestows all wishes of your devotees, you took over the churning of the ocean by yourself, and you also took up the responsibility of doing the final parts of it, leaving Devas and Asuras to rest by holding both hands of the serpent king in your hands, and you did the churning. A question again can come, why did he do all the drama for thousands of years for Devas and Asuras to churn the ocean, go through processes of going up and down, just like now when he is finishing the job but doing for both sides, he could have done it in the beginning and got the final result. No, Bhagavan had to wait for all your efforts, whether you are behaving like a Deva or an Asura. Ultimately, he makes the call when to come and how to get things accomplished, but you got to do your job. At that time, you dark blue like a rain cloud with a golden yellow garment wrapped around your loins, Pitambara, with 1,000 hands and a long garland of silver flowers hanging from your neck, shone forth like a rival mountain on the shores of the ocean against the Mandara mountain in the sea. No Guru Airappa, you appeared in such a magnificent form. That's how Bhattadri ends this Dashakam. Having enjoyed the narration of how Bhagavan brought together the warring Devas and Asuras to commence a huge task, Bhattadri stops here to finish the Dashakam. To elaborate in two more Dashakam, the emergence of goddess Lakshmi and then his own incarnation as Mohini for a purpose for the final distribution of the nectar that came out of the process. We will see more of all of this in Amruta Manthana by Bhattadri in the coming sessions. Let us now do a little digression like what we have done usually in the prior sessions to enjoy a select few of the descriptions of this episode by Azwars and also Andal. Sindura Chambadipol Tirumaliruncholayengum Indira Kobangale Yerundum Paranditanaval Sindura Chambadipol Tirumaliruncholayengum Indira Kobangale Yerundum Paranditanaval Mandaru Nati Endru Madura Konjaru Konda Sundaratoludayan Sugalayininru Uidungalo Sundaratoludayan Sugalayininru Uidungalo. சிந்துர செம்படி போல் திருமாலிருஞ்சோலை எங்கும் இந்திர கோபங்களே எழுந்தும் பரந்திட்டனவால் மந்தரம் நாட்டியன்று மதுரக் குழஞ்சான்று கொண்ட சுந்தர தோளுடையான் சுழலை நின்று உய்துங்கொலோ. Andal says in Nachiyar Tirumozhi in the 9th chapter, Butterflies are spread all over Tirumaliranjolai mountain like the red Shindura powder. Shinduram we say in Tamil, adapted from Shindura from Sanskrit, which are usually applied on an elephant's forehead. Nowadays we call them kumkumam. The hills remind Andal of her Kannan, who is huge like an elephant. She laments that this lord who long ago at the request of the Devas, who toiled for the Amrutam, made a rod out of the Mandara mountain. Andal laments that this lord who long ago at the request of the Devas, who toiled for the Amrutam, made a rod out of the Mandara mountain, churned the ocean and obtained the sweetest Amrutam, namely goddess Lakshmi, will neither appear in front of her nor let her forget him. She wonders if she will ever be able to escape the Maya net spread by Sundarabahu Perumal, the Lord of Tirumaliranjolai. Thiruvaiyaru Thurayalangal Malayai Amayagi Argadal Thuyindravadi Devanin Namadeyam Innadanna Vallamallamagilum Samaveda Geetanaya Chakravani Allaye அரங்கனே தரங்கநீர் கலங்கவன்று குன்றுசூழ் மரங்கடேய மாநிலம் துலுங்கமா சுழஞ்சுலாய் நெருங்க நீ கடைந்த போல் நின்ற சூரரென் செய்தார் குரங்கையாழு கந்த வெந்தை கூறு தேர பேரிலே அம்புலாவு மீனுமாகி ஆமையாகி ஆழியார் தம்பிரானுமாகி மிக்கதன்பு மிக்கதன்றியும் கொம்பராவும் மரங்குலாய மாதர் பிள்ளையாய் எம்பிரானுமாய வண்ணம் என்கொலோவின் ஈசனே எம்பிரானுமாய வண்ணம் என்கொலோவின் ஈசனே எம்பிரானுமாய வண்ணம் என்கொலோவின் ஈசனே. Next one is from Thiruvaiyaru Puran, who did the Tiruchanda Viruttam. I said in the past that it has got a rhythm, Chandam, even though it is described as Viruttam, because it can be sung both as Viruttam as well as with Talam or rhythm. Thuvaiyaru Thurayalangal Malayai Amayagi Algadal Tuyindravadi Deva Nin Namadeyam Innadanna Vallamallamagilum Samaveda Geetanaya Chakrabani Allaye அரங்கனே தரங்கநீர் கலங்கவன்று குன்றுசூழ் மரங்கடேய மாநிலம் குலுங்க மாசுணம் சுலாய் நெருங்கனி கடைந்தபோது நின்ற சூரர் எஞ்செய்தார் குரங்கையாளு கந்தவேந்தை கூறு தேர வேரிதே அம்புலாவு மீனுமாகி ஆமையாகி ஆழியார் தம்பிரானும் ஆகிமிக்க தன்பு நிக்க தன்றியும் கொம்பராவு நுண் மரங்குலாய பாதர் பிள்ளையாய் எம்பிரானும் ஆயவண்ணன் என்கொலோ பெம்மீசனே. Azwar talks about several avatars in the three Pasurams. Then Thirumangai Azwar in Periya Tirumozhi talks about this special episode. பொங்குனீன் முடியமர்கள் தொழுதழ அமுதினை கொடுத்தளிப்பாய் பொங்குனீன் முடியமரர்கள் தொழுதழ அமுதினை கொடுத்தளிப்பான் அங்கொரு ஆமையதாகிய வாதி நின்னடிமையை அருளனக்கு அங்கொரு ஆமையதாகிய வாதி நின்னடிமையை அருளனக்கு தங்கு பேடையோடுடைய மதுகரம் கையலார் குழலனைவான் திங்கள் தோய் சென்னி மாடோ சென்றனை திருவெள்ளரை நின்றானே திங்கள் தோய் சென்னி மாடம் சென்றனை திருவெள்ளரை நின்றானே. பொங்குனீன் முடியமரர்கள் தொழுதெழ அமுதினை கொடுத்தளிப்பான் அங்கொரு ஆமையதாகிய வாதி நின் அடிமையை அருளெனக்கு தங்கு பேடை ஓடூடிய மதுகரம் தையலார் குழல் அணைவான் திங்கள் தோய் சென்னி மாடம் சென்றனை திருவெள்ளரை நின்றானே. ஓவாத்துய துயர் பிறவி உட்பட மற்ற எவ்வமையும் மூவாத்தனி முதலாய் முகுலகும் காவலோன். மூவா துயர் பிறவி உட்பட மற்ற எவ்வமையும் மூவாத்தனி முதலாய் முகுலகும் காவலோன். மாவாகி ஆமையாய் நீனாகி மானிடமாம் தேவாதி தேவ பெருமானென் தீர்த்தனே. ஆனான் அழுதையான் என்றதே கொண்டு கந்து வந்து தானே இன்னருள் செய்தன்னை முற்றவும் தானான். மீனாய் ஆமையுமாய் நரசிங்கமுமாய் குரலாய் காணாரென ஆமுமாய் கற்கியாமின்னம் கார்வண்ணனே. காணாரென ஆமுமாய் கற்கியாமின்னும் கார்வண்ணனே. நம்மாழ்வார் says in திருவாய்மொழி, ஓவா துயர் பிறவி உட்பட மற்ற எவ்வவையும் மூவாத்தனி முதலாய் மூவுலகும் காவலோன். மாவாகி ஆமையாய் மீனாகி மானிடமாம் தேவாதி தேவா பெருமானின் தீர்த்தனே. ஆனால் ஆளுடையான் என்றதே கொண்டு உகந்து வந்து தானே இன்னருள் செய்தன்னை முற்றமும் தானானான். மீனாய் ஆமையுமாய் நரசிங்கமுமாய் குரலாய் காணாரென ஆமுமாய் கற்கியாமின்னம் கார்வண்ணனே. ஆமையாய் கங்கையாய் ஆழ்கடலாய் அவனியாய் அருவரைகளாய். ஆமையாய் கங்கையாய் ஆழ்கடலாய் அவனியாய் அருவரைகளாய். நான் முகனாய் நான் வரையாய் வேள்வியாய் தக்கணையாய் தானுமானான். நான் முகனாய் நான் மறையாய் வேள்வியாய் தக்கணையாய் தானுமானம். சேமமுடை நாரதனார் சென்று சென்று துதித்திரைங்க கிடந்தான் கோயில். பூமருவி புள்ளினங்கள் புள்ளரையன்புகள் உழரும் புனலரங்கமே. பூமருவி புள்ளினங்கள் புள்ளரையன்புகள் உழரோ புனலரங்கமே. Finally, பெரியாழ்வார் says in his திருமொழி, ஆமையாய் கங்கையாய் ஆழ்கடலாய் அவனியாய் அருவரைகளாய் நான்முகனாய் நான்மறையாய் வேள்வியாய் தக்கணையாய் தானுமானான். சேமமுடை நாரதனார் சென்று சென்று துதித்திரைஞ்ச கிடந்தான் கோயில். பூமறிவை புள்ளினங்கள் புள்ளரையன் புகழ் குடரும் புனலரங்கமே. தேவுடைய மீனமாய் அமையாய் ஏனமாய் தேவுடைய மீனமாய் அமையாய் ஏனமாய் அரியாய் குரலாய் அரியாய் குரலாய். தேவுடைய மீனமாய் அமையாய் ஏனமாய் அரியாய் குரலாய். மூருவினி ராமனாய் கண்ணனாய் கற்கியாய் முடிப்பால் கோயில். சேவலொடு விடையன்னம் செங்கமல மலரேறி உஷலாடி பூமனை மேல் துதைந்தழு செம்பொடியாடி விளையாடும் புனலரங்கமே. தேவுடைய மீனமாய் ஆமையாய் ஏனமாய் அரியாய் குரலாய் மூவுருவினி ராமனாய் கண்ணனாய் கற்கியாய் முடிப்பாங்கோயில் சேவலொடு பெடையன்னம் செங்கமலமேறி ஊசலாடி பூவனை மேல் துதைந்தெழு செம்புடியாடி விளையாடும் புனலரங்கமே. The reincarnation of Vedavyasa in Kali Yuga gave a Dashavatara Ashtapati, the very first Gita Govindam in the 12th century. Let us listen to just the Pallavi and the stanza highlighting the Kurmavatara and conclude this session in a musical form. Pralaya payodi jale
केशवा प्रलयमयोनिचरे केशवा कृतवानसि वेदं केशवा प्रलयमयोनिचरे केशवा कृतवानसि वेदं केशवा विहितमहेन्द्र चरित्रमकेदं विहितमहेन्द्र चरित्रमकेदं केशवा जय जगदीश केशवा जय जगदीश शिदिरदिवि कुलधरे केशवा तव दीक्षे शिदिरदिवि कुलधरे केशवा तव दीक्षे धरणि धरण किन चक्रगरीशे धरणि धरण किन चक्रगरीशे केशवा धृत कच्छपरूप केशवा धृत कच्छपरूप जय जगदीश हरे केशवा जय जगदीश हरे
प्रलय पयोति जले धृतवानसि वेदं विहित वहित्र चरित्रम अखेदं केशवा धृत मीन शरीर जय जगदीश हरे क्षितिरति विपुलतरे केशवा तव तिष्ठति पृष्ठे धरणि धरण किण चक्र गरिष्ठे केशवा धृत कच्छप रूप जय जगदीश हरे ओ केशवा। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते नारायणाय ओम नमो भगवते गुरुवायूरप्पा नारायण 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 हरे कृष्णा